Hi everyone and welcome back to the multiverse of 100 plus data science project series. In this video, we're going to be creating here a AI code assistant using Pythons. So without wasting our time, let us start our tutorial right now. First, let's have a look about the data flow summary. So we're going to taking here the input from the users in a two-way. One is an image that you can see, another one in the form of text. So let's say if the users give here an images which contain here the problem statement. So you're going to using here a library called pillow in order to loading these images. So you can say pill image load. And after that, you're going to using here this PyTesseract OCR API, also called the optical character recognitions. Using this one, you're going to starting the text which is available inside our images. And our image is containing some of the problem statement based on the coding problems. Okay, we essentially taking the coding problem for the lead code. Let's say now, if the user just directly give it here the questions in the prompt text, so you don't need to do this kind of processing. Okay, or directly jump on this prompt creation part. So this is the part. So if the user give one images, so you need to taking the images and it also load the images using the PLO library. And after that, you're using here this PyTesseract OCR API in order to extracting this text. And after that, you're simply going to creating here and prompts. Now it's our part prompt creations. And after that, you can call here our Groq large language model. Okay. So using this one, we can easily accessing here free and open source model. So generally, basically using here the Llama model by Facebook, I already say Meta. So Groq LLM API calls. So you call here one API call for the Groqs, and our model is also give the response in the form of Markdown. You can see in the form of Markdowns. And from this Markdown, we basically starting here our Python codes, because the assistant that are going to make it out is just give you the answers in the from a Python programming language. It just give you the Python codes. Okay, so we're starting the Python code from the Markdown, that is a response is coming from the large language model. And after that, you're going to using here an external API, also called E2B sandbox. So sandbox code execution. Using this one, we basically execute our code, which is a third-party APIs. And after that, you're going to using here our execution part. I mean, our next part is execution and output or error. So if we got any kind of error in our code, so obviously it will also checking by our the Groq large language model. I mean, the error you got, the error is also analyzed by this Groq API. I am talking about the large language model. I mean, Llama model. Okay. Then after that, we display here all of the results. Simple. So this is our AI code assistance. See, we just give it here one input as an image, I mean, which will contain the problem statement. Then we load the image using the pillow library. Then using the PyTesseract OCR API in order to extract in the text. And after that, we create here a prompt. Then we're calling here our Groq large language model API. And after that, we're going to pass our pass our static text inside our the large language model, and our large language model give a response in the from our markdowns. And from this markdown, you're starting here the Python code, and after that you send it to our the sandbox, I mean E2B API, and it will also execute the program. And if the program execution is failed or we may have some kind of errors, so you can also justify it this error using this Groq large language model in the also explanations. And after that, you're simply going to display all of the results. Okay, that's it. Now let's see what are the module and what are the purpose of that. So the module first you're using here, that's called the OS, also called the operating systems. So it's basically accessing here the environmental variables and the set API keys for the sandbox execution environment. So we're basically using here an .env file. So here we basically storing here our Groq API as well as here our E2B. I am talking about the sandbox that you can see, this sandbox execution environment. So that's why we're going to using here this OS. And after that, you're going to using here this PLO library. Okay, you can see pil.image. So you already know that using this PLO library, we basically loading here our images that is passed by our users. Okay. So this PLO library actually help us to load and handle the image file for processing by the OCR, optical character recognitions. And then you're going to using here a library called Acno. So using this Acno, we basically creating here some kind of agents. But in here, we basically wrap and interact with the Groq large language model to send the prompt and receive it here the completions. You know that the large language model basically at last, while you're taking the input, it will process them based on the prompt, and it also give you here one chat completions. That's also done by this Acno library. And after that, you can using here this E2B interpreter, which one is nothing but an library itself. And from that, you're going to using here this sandbox. So this is basically sequentially execute the Python code snippet and capture their output or error. You can also using here the by default built-in executions methods in Python, but it's better you can also using here this sandbox. And after that, you're going to using here this .env .load .env, so that you can loading here some of the environmental variables. Basically, I am talking about the API keys, the Groq API keys, and the E2B API keys from .env file for the secure configurations. And after that, the base64, it's basically used in encoding here the images as base64, because you know that we in our application we basically use here two types of input format. So one is nothing but one image itself, another one is a text. So if the user just give it here and text, so it will just it's just going to actually uh, pause these executions in the case of base64, as well as this byte IO, because it's not needed at all. It's just needed in the case of images when the user uploading here the image files. Okay, so it's used for encoding images as base64 string to send the Bishon models, because in the from a Bishon model is just taking the input in the from a base64. So you can see optional in OCR flow. You can see optional in OCR flow. Then io.byte IO, it's basically used if image processing conversion to byte is needed. Okay, it's also the optional depending on the flow actually. Okay, so I need to do that coding, then you will understand that why you need to using here this kind of model, what are the purpose of that. Okay, now what I can do first, I'm going to go on the website called the E2B, that you can see E2B documentations. You can see, just go on here and sign up with your Gmail accounts. So what you can do basically, if I go in the Python, that you can see pip install E2B code interpreter that you already used here. I mean, we already discussed about that, the module and the purpose of that. So you can learn about that. What is the E2B? E2B is an open source infrastructure that allow you to run AI generated code in secure isolated sandbox in the cloud, that you can see. So to start and control sandbox, use your Python SDK or the JavaScript SDK. So what you can do is simply going to go inside this API key sections and click on API key. And you can see how can you basically using here your API key and how to find the API key actually. So you can go on the dashboard and then you can generally basically accessing here the API key directly. So you can see here I already creating here two things. One is the unnamed API key and another one is the projects. So I'm just going to using this one to accessing the sandbox. So after that, it's also installing here another thing that's called a PyTesseract. Okay, so using this one, you basically extracting the text from our the images. Okay, so what I can do is simply going to copy this out. We can copy this out, and you can simply going to opening our terminal, and then you can paste it here. This pip install PyTesseract. Okay. Also, one more thing, but if you install it, it not also work in the case of Windows. You have to also install here one executable file. You have to go inside this documentations of the Tesseract. It's nothing but a GitHub file. So you can see Tesseract OS here. So you have to go down and then you have to installing here this Tesseract. So install the Tesseract via pre-built binary packages. And after that, you can simply go on here. If you're using Ubuntu, you can using here this command. If you're using Debian, you can install it from here. If you're using Raspberry Pi, you can use it from here. Because I'm using here the Windows, so I'm searching for the Windows. That you can see Tesseract as this UB manhim, or you can also download the appropriate training data, as well as you can download these older versions. So you can click on here. You can download the latest versions. So you can see this Tesseract OCR W64 setup file. Okay, so I am not going to install it, but I'm going to show you that how you can basically set up this one in your environmental variables. So what I can do, I'm just going to opening here my environmental variable right now. Here actually basically store here my environmental paths. So here you go. We can say that the environmental path. So you need to also do this one. So after installing that, you will basically got in here and uh, the paths. You need to also add it in your environmental variable so that you can easily access it from in here. So you need to just search for the environmental variable and you need to clicking here this environmental variables and click on paths and now click on edit. Then you can see here I already added this out. You can see program file tesseract auth here. It's by default actually install on in this location. So you can see I already actually adding this out. So I can using this tesseract API. Okay. So now click on OK. Now click on OK. Now click on OK. Fine. So cool. So this is all about the installation part. I mean Tesseracts as well as the E2B that you can see. Now we simply going to go on our coding parts. Okay, so what I can do, that's our coding part that you can see. So I already done this code before, so I'm just going to spelling out the code line by line, as well as you know that what the module is basically used and what are the purpose of the using this module actually. So you can see first you import here the OS. It's nothing but for operating system actually. For you can creating here any kind of files. You can also accessing here the environment variables. Then from P you're going to import here the image so that you can also loading here the image. And then Py tesseract, you know that for starting here the text. And then you're going to using here is from acno.agent. You're going to import it here the agent so that you can creating here an AI agents. And then from acno.models.groq, you're going to import here the groqs. And then from E2B, the E2B code interpreter, you're going to import here the sandbox. And then from .env, you're going to import it here, this load.env. So in our .env file, you can see we have one Groq API key, as well as we have our E2B API key that we actually store it here, okay? Now we're simply going to calling this out, but before that, it's better at first when you are actually using the tesseract, it's better before the load.env, you just initialize here your Py tesseracts. So Py tesseract.tesseract.tesseract.cmd. Here you give it here our file path C, program file tesseract OCR and tesseract.exe. If you're just using here the by default next, you will getting here this kind of actually this path. Okay, so after that what we can do, we're simply going to calling here this load.env so that we can loading here our environmental variables. Now we store it, the Groq API key is equal to os.got get env, and you passing here our Groq API key and as well as this E2B API key. Then you're going to using here this code agents. You can see agents equal to Groq ID is nothing but our model. So you can also using here this llama 3.317 billion versatile model. You can use any of them. Versatile. You can use it from here, but it's better you can go on the Groq cloud and let you know that. Let's say Groq cloud. So this is the API key sections. You can easily access the API. So if I go on the docs, so here you can basically creating here the API key. Okay, so let's go on the docs. You can see the models. So what are the models basically available? So we are going to be basically using this model llama 3.317 versatile. Just go on the API key section and just copy your API key. I already do it multiple times, in my videos. Okay, and Groq is free and open source. You can easily use it. You don't need to install the llama. So now let's go on the code. So you can see we're creating here an agent. So here you passing here our models, and then our ID as our versatile, that you can see versatile. The same model that you can see versatile 17. But if you have any confusion, you can copy this out and you can paste it. Okay, if you have any confusions in the case of the pronunciation or in the case of spellings. Okay, and API key is equal to Groq API key and markdown is equal to true. Now see, markdown is equal to true because if I go on my explanation that you can see, we basically see the model response is coming in the form of markdowns. So that's why we give it here markdown is equal to true. And after that, creating here a function which on helper to start in the code from the markdown actually, and which is taking here an string itself. So if Pythons in markdown, we're simply splitting them. Okay, but it's better you can go on this def main functions. Okay, main functions. So it also taking here problem statement. So what I can do, I can go on the lead code. So let's say find minimum element in rotate short array lead code. That's taking these questions. This question is famous questions, which one is nothing but from the binary source. No problem, we will solving this problem as well as in our DSM multiverse series. Okay, so we can we can just opening here the sniping tool. You can say sniping tool, and we can basically taking the questions. Okay, let's click on here and let's take in the questions with the examples. Okay, just taking here the questions. Okay, now we simply going to saving this out. Here I go. I already saved this out actually. GNA projects, AI code assistant. So here you can say that this is our test. Okay, test question. You can say that test question dot png. Okay, you can basically using this out. Okay, now what I can do, You can see I already written the code on here. It's already written. Okay, but just okay, reload it. Okay, it not needed. Okay, discard it. Okay, okay, थोड़ा इसको zoom करते हैं इसको, क्योंकि इसको काट करने के लिए थोड़ा zoom किया था मैंने actually. So now let's go on here in our code. So you can see we have our file test question.png. So you can also make it, rename it. You can make it png small letter. Same thing, you can same question you can see. So now what you can do is simply going to changing this one. Okay, this is the test question .png. Fine. Now I'm going to using this image.opens and you're passing here our image path, and then you're going to using this tesseract by tesseract dot image to string, and you're passing here image, and you also strip it. So this is nothing but our static test. If the image is not containing here any kind of text, so it said no text detected in image, and then it returning that. Okay, and if it got here any kind of text, so it will painting this text as well. Now, we need to also creating here a prompt so that you can pass it to our large language models. So quote prompt is equal to you are an expert Python developer. Write complete optimal code for problem below. You can see problem, which is structured code itself. Include type hint and sample input output example if possible. And then you're going to using here this code agent that you created. You can see code agents. So code agent dot run, and you simply going to passing here this code uh, the prompt. Okay, and then the solution is coming from the started code from markdowns. So solution is coming from here. So started code from markdown, because our AI is basically give the response from the markdowns, so it also split them. So if here we have the pythons in markdown, we're simply going to say that markdown dot split in the case of pythons, and first one, because we're taking the first of that, and split it, and the execute index dot strip, and we're returning here the markdown dot strip. Okay, and then you can see that, and we got in here and solutions. So no valid code block found in Groq response. If we don't get any valid code block like the Python, so we just printing here no valid code block found in Groq response. So just we painting here the solutions, that you can solutions. Now we are going to using here the sandbox for execution of the programs, so that you can also show it in our the applications. I mean our Flux applications, and you can see app review file. So then you can see we using his os.environ, and you can passing here this e2b API key and e2b API key. Then you calling here the sandbox timer equal to 30, and execution equal to sandbox.run code of the solution that is coming from uh, this Groq LLMs. Okay, and if the execution error, we also explaining this executions error using here our Groq large language models. So explain this Python error, that you can execution those errors, and then we simply going to printing this out. Otherwise, we simply going to printing here our executions.log.std out. I mean our inputs and hash attributes or std out like that, and we printing here our executions. So if it have the multiple line of input, so it will also showing this out. Okay, that's it. Now what you can do is simply going to saving this out, and you can directly go on here and you can run in the Python files. Okay, so it will basically running here this Python file, so you can directly jump like that. Okay, and waiting for our output. So we basically using here this question for find the minimum element. Okay, where do you go? Find the minimum in rotated shorted array. So waiting for the output, it's nothing but a main.py file. It just extracting the text from here, and then it also loading here of the models as well as the API key from here. So let's wait for a few minutes and try to see the outputs. Well, so you can see that it also starting the informations, find minimum in rotate short array, and you can see medium, topic, and companies, and you can see hint. So you can see it is extracting the information correctly, but it got one error. So argument of run response is not iterables. Okay, we got an error. Okay, sorry, my bad actually, because it's not running in here. The problem is it's running in here, but it's not running in here. But why? Because we're running it in a terminal. So you need to also convert them into from strings. The response in the from string. That's why it's unable to capture it correctly. Okay, that's my bad actually. So now we can running this out, run Python file. So you can see I will run it before, and you also got the response. So now you can wait for that. So you can see that after that, you can see we got in here our response. So you can see this is the code. It's look like the ugly, but how you try to implement it in the applications. So you can also uh, get it. Okay. Okay, that you can see. Okay. Now let's try to closing this out, but it's better you can just give it here the questions list. Okay, but I just give it to here the test question list. You can see some kind of special character as well. Okay, fine, cool. Now let's go on the app.py file and try to testing this out first. And after that, I'm going to explaining here out the code line by line. Okay, so here I need to using his llama 3.3 17 million versatile model as well. Let's use it. And now I am simply going to running it here. This is running the applications. And after that, I'm going to explaining here out the code line by line. Okay, nothing so fancy. So it will running in the 127.0.0.1. So you can see that it is opening. So you can see here, you can asking any questions. So you can also choose the file from here. So let's say create a function uh, to reverse array. Okay, reverse array. So click on generate and execute. So you can see it running as well. If I go on the code, it also executed. So you can see here the array. You can see the solutions. You can see the input array, the reversed array, input string, and the reverse string. Okay. Now you can also upload here the file. So you can choose hit here file. Let's choose it from here and click on open. And now generate and execute. Let's see. This is the image that actually uh, taking it before the same image. I just take it. You can see find minimum in rotated short array. You can see here the code. You can see start a test. Okay, how you actually using here the file. So it will basically start any problems. You can see the same problems. And this is solutions. And you can see here these outputs. So what you can do, you can basically copy it from here. You can copy it and you can also test it on here as well. You can test it on here as well. Okay, in the lead code. So I can copy this out. I can copy it and I can go on here and I'm going to paste it here. So here it also do some changes. It maybe got some indentation error, so it also take care of them. So here we go, and then here we go, and then this is the else block. This is the right case, and then we maybe okay, it should be here. Okay, and while it's here, the meat is here, the if block is here. Okay, if the meat is nothing but the less than, otherwise you simply going to show the right. And here you go, is simply going to returning here this one. Okay, now let's click on run. Any error wrong? Okay, unknown network error. Please try to reloading the page. Okay, so I'm going to copy here this one, and I'm going to reloading here the page. I had to reload the page again. It's super slow. My network is because I'm using here the mobile networks. Okay, so maybe it coming. Okay, so I passed the code that I copied from our applications. So we can removing it out. It's not needed at all. So left while, and this is the point. Okay, so here you can returning this out. Now you can running this out. Let's see. Okay, you can see accepted. You can see that accepted. I mean, our application is also working very fine. It's cool. Now let's go on the code. So this is our application. Now let's go on the code and try to see. Okay, this is our application. Let's try to closing this out, clean the terminals. So same thing, we can see we just imported the OS and we just do here next starting, just adding here one UI. So from Flux, we imported the Flux, then request and the render templates. And then from Pillow library, we're going to importing the image. Then the Python select the Ecno you import here the agents, the Groq, the sandbox, and also the .env. Then you also give it here this testx and this creating here application Flask applications. You can see Groq API key, the code agents. Then we're creating here a route. So you basically creating here one single route. We have initial route, this one, and we give it to the method as a get method and a post method, because we're taking the input from the users in the form of text or in the form of images. Then you're going to creating here three variables. We're basically creating here functions called def index. And then we're creating here three variables, one for the start date, another one for solutions, and another one for results. If I go inside this index.html, which is nothing but my UI file. So it's a simple UI file that you can see. We're just having one header. So Groq code assistant, that you can see the same thing on here, Groq code assistant. And after that, we have our one from. So here we basically give it here method and the post methods, and then you also give it here encryption type as a multi-paired from data. And then you have a deep, which one is taking the input from the users. So here you can uploading here the coding problem image that you can see, okay, that you can basically see on here the upload coding problems. And after that, what you have another deep for pasting your coding problem, or you can also typing this out. And then you have a patterns, which is called the generate and executes. And then you can see we have the three blocks for if started, or if the solutions, or if the results. Okay, so these are the things is coming from this app.py file, and this is called Jinja templates. So let's go on the app.py file. So we basically creating here three variable. One is called started, another one is called solution, and another called results, which you can see started, the solution, and the results. That you're going to passing it from this app.py file to the index.html. So if the requested method is basically post, it's mean any user is basically uploading here an image, or maybe a query. So if the user is basically uploading here a query, so we're taking here the query. If the user is uploading here images, you're also taking this out. So if image, not a query, we're just simply going to load it. So you can see image.open and using his image.stream. See, image.stream. While you are taking the input from the any kind of web applications, you're to taking the image in the form of streams. Sorry. And then you're going to using here is pytestselect.image to string, and you're passing here image and it's stripped. And then you can see started text. If the started text is not here, if it's not containing here any kind of text, you just say that no text is detected in image. And if the started and a started is not equal to no text detected in image, that you can see, that's when we're simply going to further go it. We can further creating here our code prompts. Okay. So code prompt, the same prompt that you can see, and then you're going to using here this code agent that you created using the Acno library, and then you're going to calling here this started code from markdown, and you're passing here response.content. Now you don't need to give it here a string, and inside the string you don't need to give it here response.contents. Okay, it automatically handling these out applications. Then if the solution is coming up, so we're basically using here the sandbox, and any error we can basically show it. You can see show it in a from D, and else you're simply going to show our output. Otherwise, it's simply going to show here our results that you can see. No valid code block found in Groq response if you don't get any kind of response. So you can see render templates, and we have our index.html, then started test equal to started, the solutions, and the results. So which is directly accessing by this index.html, that you can see started, the solutions, and the result. So if the started is coming up, so it's simply going to showing it here. If the solution is coming it here, we're simply going to show it here. If the result is coming here, we're simply going to show it here, that you can see result. So our result, we maybe have some kind of the special character, and also make it mark it as the same. Okay. And after that, you can see that we have our actually the query and not image. So if it's just a query, so we can basically give it here two types of things. If it is image, not a query, so we do these things, we do this thing. If it is a query but not image, we do this thing. But same code, but we just do it for the multiple times. So here we basically using the pytest select in one of the cases, and another of the cases we just copy here this code from this code prompt, and we simply going to pass it here. They can see the same thing, the same thing, the same thing, the same thing. And here the render template, you also passing here the started, the solutions, and the results. Okay. Now you can see the same function that we discussed on here in our main.py file. That's it. You can see that. And after that, you can simply going to calling here this if that is going to name in, and you simply going to say that app.debugs is going to true. Okay, so this is our applications, and this is our UI files. Now we can basically running here our again. So let's click on run Python file, and let's see our outputs for the last time. It's super simple, nothing fancy, but just you actually using two things. One is a Groq API, another one is basically our sandbox. Okay, now let's go on here. This 127.0.0.1 and the 5,000 ports. Cool. Now write your Python functions too. You can choose any kind of file, any kind of questions. So now let's say, uh, let's give it here a question. Let's say find lower bound from a shorted array. Okay, it's the questions from the binary search. Find lower bound from a shorted array. So generate and execute. Let's wait for a few seconds for outputs. So if I go on the code, you can see it will also calling here this API key. And now you can see got the solutions. So typing is equal to list, and you can see the code. You can see lower bound of 4 is equal to 3 itself. Here you go. Lower bound of 7 is nothing but the 6 itself, because these last elements. And lower bound of 0 is obviously 0 itself. And lower bound of 5, it's not here, so it's obviously 0. Cool. Okay, so you can also say testing for the last time again. So let's say find upper bound as well. Okay, upper. Okay, let's say find peak element from a shorted array. It may be the okay. Okay, let's say these ones. Another question is wrong, but it's obviously from the binary search. I just give it to here. Let's wait for the outputs. Yeah, here's also give the outputs. The array is empty. I don't know what kind of code you actually give it here. Okay, so that's it from my side actually, that how this application actually work. And in the next video tutorial, we try to cover up here the more of the informations or more of the projects about the GenAI. And from the August, we are going to actually opening here our next series. That's called the DSA Multiverse. So that's it for today now. I hope you enjoyed this full tutorial, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. And thank you and bye-bye.